Today's guest on A Life and a Living is Paul Candon, who's the CEO of United Hardware, which is a very large business based in Ireland, and they are a supplier to over 150 independent contractors that are a combination of builders, providers, DIY, and home and garden retailers. And really want to talk to Paul because it's an interesting business model in the sense that they've got the business of United Hardware, but also they've got this very close relationship with over 150 independently owned retailers. And how do you actually manage that when COVID hits? And it's a really interesting conversation because Paul talks about how they had to respond and how they had to react. He talks about how to trust his people to actually do the right thing. And one of the things he talks about is the resilience of people to actually manage where there is no formula and there is no playbook for doing this, and how the business thrived, and also how they engaged with their customers to make sure that those customers felt that they were being supported and they were also getting supply chain. Of course, paradoxically, in that awful time of COVID that we're still going through, the business was thriving because people were, at home and more interested in doing things in their garden and homes and painting and decorating and barbecuing. So Paul has got a very interesting perspective because it was a business that was, his head office staff working remotely, the warehouse staff had to work in the warehouse, obviously, to provide, but then it was a different way of working for both sets of employees. And then the third group of stakeholders were the independent retailers that he's connected to. So it's a very, very interesting perspective. And Paul is a very experienced CEO and a great commercial brain that he brings to bear to this. So I think you will enjoy listening to Paul and to all the strategies that they really undertook to ensure that the business of United Hardware continues to thrive during this challenging time. Paul, thank you so much for being a guest on A Life and a Living. It's fantastic to have you here, and I'm delighted to share your story with the audience. So maybe you might just give just a little bit of background so people have context in terms of the business and the business model you have, because it's an interesting model that you have, so that people understand what it is and the challenges that COVID bring. But maybe just explain a bit of background about yourself and the model.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, John. I've been involved with United Hardware Group for the last 4 years. First of all, as a non-executive chairman, and last May, in the middle of lockdown, I came in and took up the CEO role. United Hardware is a builders merchants buying group, and what we do is we source product throughout the world. We bring it to Ireland, we consolidate it in our warehouse facilities in City West, and then we ship it out to our members, which we have 152 builders merchants, DIY stores throughout Ireland. Second to that, then, we do all the central billing, purchasing deals with all of the major suppliers, such as Irish Cement or our insulation suppliers, our timber suppliers, etc. And then our members avail of those prices. So basically we're pooling our volume, collating that, and being able to deliver far better purchasing deals for our members who are part of our group. We also provide other services like, obviously the whole digital website offer. We obviously try and enable them to improve their business, etc. And we trade under a brand of which we've got about 85 of our members branded as Home Value. Right. So that's kind of an overview of our business.
So it's an interesting model in the sense that the members are all independently owned businesses. So here you are now. You were right. I mean, your timing taking over as CEO was kind of magical, wasn't it? In some ways, to come in May, but you come into COVID. Nobody was prepared. Nobody was kind of set up for it. You now have got a model where your kind of distribution model is through independent business owners. How did you move? I mean, when it hit, what did you have to do? What were the things you had to do quickly?
Mm-hmm. Well, as we know, it hit in March of 2020, and I was chairman of the business at that point, so I had a lot of decisions to make very quickly, which was how will we operate and service our customer? So, and how will we ensure we care for our employees? And none of us knew, like in the very first few days, the first 2 or 3 days, when Leo Varadkar made his speech from the States, and I think it was around the 10th or 11th of March or so, like people were just in shock. What does this mean? What is a pandemic? We've never seen anything like it. So immediately we had to say, okay, have we got the technology in place to get everybody working from home? And thankfully we had, and we were very progressed in that space. So all of our critical business functions could continue to operate. And so the first thing was to tell employees, stay at home, get your PCs, get your screens, get your chairs, whatever you need, set yourself up at home, and checking in with all employees, literally one by one through our management teams, etc., to see are they set up and is everything able to work satisfactorily, and sorting out the glitches. The second big issue was to keep our supply chain going. Were we going to be able to take product in and get product out, or was our business going to close? So yes, initially what happened was in the first phase of the lockdown, our businesses were closed down, and that, but then we were okay to supply emergency product, because the nature of our thing, we're selling plumbing products, we're selling boilers, we're selling DIY products. So people are going to need these things, like for securing their houses or their businesses or any kind of maintenance and so on. So we were quite busy, but it was all either click and collect or phone and collect or phone and deliver. And it all had to be worked through in terms of how do we keep our businesses safe, and how do we advise our customers, our members, as to how they should run their business. So we were tapping into all of the government information. We were tapping into the retail sector's information for Retail Excellence Ireland and IBEC and people.
And like just for people outside of Ireland, Paul, just because I mean your distribution is effectively they're DIY home and garden retailers and builders merchants. Were they open at that time? Were all of these businesses allowed to stay open, or were they shut, or was it kind of a bit of a mix and match?
It was, there was a lot of uncertainty in the early stages. Do we open? Can we open? And so on. Predominantly, they were closed but open for click and collect and that. So paint became a big commodity product, like where people wanted to kind of plan projects because they were going to be at home, they're going to be in their gardens. The weather was really good. People started to look to source garden furniture and barbecues and things like that and so on. So we were trying to service people from a critical sector or an essential retailer point of view. And it was really about the practical things, trying to get that right and so on. Like in our warehouse, which is essential for product coming in and product going out to our members, we had to do lots of things like splitting shifts and segregating them and separate entrances and staffing areas. And then obviously there was getting the right PPE. We had to make sure our phone systems all worked in a different way, etc. So really making incredibly big decisions that would normally be taking a long time to think through, just making them on the hoof. That's what I had to do with the team. And, putting the safety of employees first, as well as trying to keep the business running. And it was very, very challenging, I have to say, and not a huge amount of advice and information forthcoming as to what we should do. And there was certainly learning along the way, absolute learning on the hoof and so on. But we managed to get through it. And I think one of the things as a CEO from May, I felt that I really needed to trust and empower my employees, my management team, right down. And I think that paid dividends. They said, look, they were asking questions. Well, should I work the same hours? I said, look, do what you need to do to get the job done, right? Do what you think is right, is what I was generally saying to people, rather than to try and pigeonhole them into a very precise answer that you normally would, maybe with your advice from your HR people, etc. Just allowing people to say, look, do what you think is right. And actually, that was probably the part of the best learning that I had through it, that people did the right thing. And,
Yeah.
you know, when you know, a lot of people might be suspicious, oh, they'll be sunning themselves in the back garden. They weren't. They were working
No.
incredibly hard and productivity went up. Would you believe
Yeah,
it? You know,
it's
we could see
extraordinary.
it.
Isn't it? And did
Mm,
you find? I mean, Paul, we've known each other for quite a long time, and I mean, you've got a lot of experience in business in the commercial world. I mean, did you find that you were making adjustments to your own way of working and to your own way of managing and leading people? And
yeah.
what were those changes?
Yeah, well, look, the first thing personally, I had to think about my family, and I had to say, right, how are they going to be? I've got teenagers, you know, with college. I have one in school. I had to say, look, how are they going to operate and get them up and running? Schools closed, colleges closed. Can I keep them in? How do I convince them that it's dangerous to go out? And how do we stay entertained? So we had to have a sort of a family powwow about this, and so we're going to have a focus on Saturday night. We're going to have fun. So we created Come Dine With Me on Saturday nights and themed out the kitchen, and people partnered up and did a big meal, and we had cocktail parties, and it was great. We came back and bonded together. So that was some of the personal things that I had to do, making sure they were safe and engaged and happy. And there was a bit of a novelty in the early stages of the lockdown on all
Yeah,
this. And we all thought it'd be over in 3, 4, 5 weeks, but geez, it went on and
yeah,
on. But then my role had to change in the business context. Like as a CEO, I had to spend a lot of time engaging with people every single day, using Zoom or Teams. I had to really portray the importance of doing the right thing, caring for our employees, putting employees first in our decision making, making sure that our customers were receiving the support that they needed to get as well, and keep the business going. I mean, you've got to see if you can keep the cash flow right and coming in, like the important things that you've got to do, and make sure that you're going to have product arriving, because
yeah,
that's the lifeblood of the business, and that we had people, and the people were comfortable enough to be able to do those things. So huge number of decisions around, like, you know, in the warehouse, you'd have, you know, one of our operators would jump out of a fork truck and then would jump into a different fork truck in a different zone in the warehouse and so on. We couldn't have that because the
yes,
fork
yeah,
trucks had to be sanitized. So
yeah,
then we had to designate fork trucks for individual people. You're the same with your handheld terminals when you're picking and selecting. All of the IT, the keyboards, all common keyboards in the warehouse had to be changed out to personal keyboards. You had to switch from keyboards to laptops and so on. So real practical stuff, you
yeah,
know, was
yeah.
going on that you had
And
to
of course,
think through.
you've also got kind of the mix. I mean, you've got your own direct employees
Yeah,
of United Hardware, but then also you've got you've got your members who are, you've got a very close, obviously a very close business relationship, with some of them are branded with you, but you've got a
yeah.
very close business relationship, and of course they're also independent business owners. So how did you find that you needed to interact and support them during that time, because they've all got their own individual worries, individual concerns, both
Yeah,
personal, commercial, and everything else.
yeah.
And so how did that relationship have to shift?
What we had to do a lot more engagement with them. So our operations team, which would normally be out in the field visiting our members every single day, they were grounded because, you know, we couldn't be calling in and traveling. So it was constantly on calls with them, providing them with advice and guidance. Even down to us sourcing the perspex screens that they required then for, you know, for their employees, because after a period of the first lockdown, then we were deemed as an essential retailer and we were open.
You're open,
And
yeah.
and when we were opened, then we were under huge pressure because the customers, the public, were in huge demand of doing all sorts of DIY projects and painting projects. So our members were extremely busy. They had their staffing issues. There were people, there were stores that actually had to close from COVID contamination. So we had to advise them on sanitation and how to get back up and running and so on and so forth. So there was a huge amount of worrying about both sides, not just, you know, here in our own business centrally, but also how do our customers operate. We were really giving them daily advice as well on what they needed to do and
Yeah.
staying in contact, but also then making sure that we will continue to supply them with the appropriate product that they needed, and to keep them and their businesses running smoothly. So like there was a big demand on timber, and I mentioned paints. Seasonal products were in huge demand because the weather was very good, and so on. But they weren't really essential. So it was about focusing on the essential first, and then, you know, the secondary, what the public was demanding.
Yeah. And what would you say, looking at that time for you, Paul, as kind of the CEO? You come in as CEO. I mean, I know you've been involved with the business for a number of years as a chairman, executive chairman, but coming in at that time, which was really in the eye of the storm, and you know, with a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty. When you think back on it now, what do you think you learned about yourself as a leader and as a manager of people? What were the things that really came through for you?
Well, I mean, one of the things that strikes me now when I look back on it is that, like, people are very resilient. I mean, this was absolutely, you know, earth-shattering what was going on.
Yeah, there was no manual for this anyway, that's for sure.
Never seen anything like it. And it was, as I said, a novelty at first, but then the reality says, jeepers, you know, I mean, will I catch this? Will I die? You know, will we be bringing out the dead, and thinking about the movies that we've seen where pandemics are portrayed and so on? Is it going to be that bad? And hearing stories from other countries, there was real fear there. And, you know, on a personal, I had an elderly parents, I had to keep an eye on them, and shopping and practical things like that. How are we going to do those things? But what I learned in the business context is how well people responded. And you know, I also had to try and have conversations about slowing down and stopping working, because the balance between working at home, for some people, they just continue to work too much. And these were conversations I was having, and so on. And, you know, encouraging people to look after their mental health, to get out for walks, to do activities, and be at the parks and stay within their 2K zone initially, and then it went to 5K and so on. The learnings also from a business point of view is that there was much more meaningful conversations being had with management. Like, so the normal kind of stresses, you know, of managing teams, etc., were dropped, and everyone pulls together. So you didn't see like little conflicts and little issues happening. They all disappeared. We're all in this together. We need to pull together. So it was real camaraderie. That's what I saw. A lot of learning there. On the personal side, it gave me an opportunity to reconnect with, you know, teenage children when I went for my daily walk, either in the morning or the evening and so on, and have great conversations, and see places where I live that I haven't seen in years, and out for the walks and so on, and actually recognize that there's a lot of nature around us. And then I mentioned earlier on the fun nights we had as a family, and so on, you know.
And the things that you did for, I mean, you're talking about your staff there, and just going back to that for a second, I mean, what were the things that you felt that you really needed to do in order to support? Because you've got a mix. You've got, you know, you're probably your head office staff that are working from home, and then you've got the staff in the warehouses who are trying to get used to a new way of working than what they had previously. What were the things that you and your team, your leadership team, had to do to really support the individuals during that time?
A lot of thanking, a lot of recognizing from people who are really going the extra mile. You know, I think we were doing, you know, delivered pizzas for lunch and everything for our warehouse employees, etc. We were recognizing and appreciating all over the place all the time. We were engaging now in a new way with our remote staff, which is, you know, town hall meetings were all moved to virtual. We were having team meetings virtual, you know, every single week, and daily check-ins with everybody to see how they are. That was just a new requirement. It was not something that we do all the time. You know, they had to be, like, it was dialed up tenfold, it was. And that took a huge amount of time, because then you had to deal with your customers and the issues. You had to deal with your suppliers in a different way. And like for me, like, we would meet suppliers so often. We would be traveling the world. We'd go, like, our teams would go to China 5 or 6 times a year and buying. They'd be going to shows all around Europe, etc. My travel agenda completely stopped. It did. And now I realize that, you know, we don't need to travel as much. Technology really stepped up. It did.
Yeah.
And, you know, I thought like this was going to be a disaster and we won't be able to go to trade shows. We now have trade shows virtually and so on, both ourselves, and we go and attend them virtually. We're buying as much as we always did, right? And we still aren't traveling. And
Yeah.
the whole thing around trade and so on has continued. So that resilience in business I've seen, and I've really learned from it. On a wider kind of thing, I've learned that, like, you know, essential workers like are in the limelight. These are the foundations of society, and the appreciation of frontline workers, you know, came to the fore through this and what they had to go through. And I classify a lot of our customers and their employees, which would be deemed as retail employees, as frontline workers as well. They didn't get time off. They couldn't just go home. They had to stay out there and serve the public, be it in a grocery store or in a pharmacy or in a DIY store. They're frontline essential workers as well as the staff and nurses and doctors in the hospitals, etc.
Yeah.
So there was huge learning. On a wider
Isn't
scale
it
as well.
interesting that you talk about, sorry, Paul, but isn't it interesting we were talking about the technology? I mean, thank God we had the technology. Can you only imagine what would have, you know, if this had happened 20 years ago, and the impact that it would have had? But I mean, you know, I'm sure the resilience would have come through as well. But when you see all this, you can see, okay, you know, historically we all would have thought, I mean, you know, like you, I would travel an awful lot, and for the last 12 months I haven't gone anywhere. And but when you look at how it, you know, it is, you know, you've been able to do the business, your business has been very successful, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But what do you see as being potentially the new way of working? What, because, you know, when this is all over, whenever that might be, it's not going to go back to the way it was. So what do you think will be the new way of working post-COVID?
Well, I'm kind of thinking, you know, when COVID finishes, my worry will be that we're going to see a global recession. Somebody's going to have to pay for all this, and we haven't really talked about that, or we're not hearing. Initially, we heard a bit about it, but lately there's not as much in the media about it. We're definitely going to see unemployment, because there will be lots of businesses that just won't reopen.
Just won't open. Yeah.
And that's the difficulty of this. My concern is that we're going to see further outbreaks, even though we're going to have vaccinations done. You're going to see variants growing up, and you're going to be worried about that in some other country, you know, South America or somewhere, and will that end up in Ireland or whatever, you know? I'm worried about certain industries. I would say that they will fail to recover. Like, you know, what will happen to the airline industry? You know, can it get back on its feet to what it was? And will the price of travel or the cost of travel just go through the roof? A surge in bankruptcies will happen, harder to travel. Passports and, you know, so on will have to change in terms of, you know, vaccination passports, etc., for travel. And I would definitely think there will be less travel. They're all the negative things and so on. But more positive things will be people have reconnected with their families, with their friends, with the free things, like the parks are full. We're appreciating nature like we never before have appreciated nature. We're realizing the impact of less traffic on the environment and less fuel contamination, etc., and how nature is coming back in a different way and recovering so fast. We're reading those stories. So there's a big wake-up call. Like, you know, do we need as many cars? Do we need to have the transport systems the way we have, and so on? So there's going to be negatives after COVID and positives after COVID from a society point of view. From a work point of view, look, let's face it, it's never going to come back. Work-life balance is going to change. Work from home is going to be here to stay now. It works. There's no reason for it. I'll be very happy to have people have a choice. I will be saying to people, look, you know, not 100% working from home. I need to see people from time to time. We need to have connectivity. And there are some people who love working from home and that I talk to, and some people who do not like it, who say, I miss the coffee with my colleagues. I miss the social interaction. I miss getting up. I miss getting dressed. I miss putting on business attire. I haven't worn a tie or a suit in, in almost a year. I can wear casual more often now, casual clothes to work. And we see that in terms of online shopping. I'm hearing things like, fashion tracksuits and all that kind of stuff are selling just ginormously. So things have definitely changed. And from a work point of view, we will rely more on technology. I think we will travel less. There will be far more work-life balance. And it's time we got real about that 9-to-5 job is probably not going to exist anymore. Allow people kind of integrate work-life balance. If you want to get up at 6 in the morning, do a couple of hours, then go off for a lovely walk for a few hours, then come back to work and do a few hours, etc. That doesn't bother me. I love that. And I think that's going to be really good for people, and I would encourage that. I've connected now. I play golf, and I used to do that on a Sunday morning. The golf clubs are closed, but I now go for local walks, and I'm lucky. I live in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains, and within my 5K, I can actually climb up the mountains into the wilderness very, very quickly. And a few friends and I meet on a Sunday morning and just go for a long, socially distanced walk in the mountains. And we wouldn't see each other maybe 2 or 3 times a year at a dinner party or something. And now we're meeting every Sunday morning, and we're really reconnecting and reminiscing, and it's fantastic. So certainly lifestyle is going to change, and society is going to change, travel is going to change. So there will be positive scars and negative scars.
But I mean, interestingly enough, from your business, from United Hardware's perspective, I mean, it's actually been a very successful time. I mean, business-wise, it has been a very successful time, hasn't it?
This has been a big bounce for us, and some businesses do really well, like, takeaway food is flying. Any of the online retailers, like, it's been the age of online has just come to life. I mean, we know it's been there, and the digital era is growing, but now it's exploding. It is, and we are investing more in our digital offers, etc. But we have been very, very busy, because I suppose when people have not got money to spend on restaurants or concerts or weekends away or holidays abroad, they're going to spend it on their house. Your home is your castle. And that's what our business is all about. It's about, providing products that people can invest in their home, be it like, paint or timber or insulation or, plumbing products or heating products or, soft furnishings, etc., or your garden and so on. So people recognize now that they want nice environments, be it even their work office environments. Huge investments has gone into that. The amount of, office tables and office chairs that we've sold, and we're DIY and builders merchants retailers.
So barbecues have been a big seller, haven't they?
Huge. Barbecues have been huge, obviously. Yeah.
So I think talking to somebody recently in the gas business, and I was saying the bottled gas business has been, I was going to say use a wrong. I was going to say exploding, which is rather wrong term to use in that case. But it has been huge. But I mean, it's been, when you look back over the time, Paul, and I mean, hindsight's always brilliant. But if you look back on the time, and of course you had to respond and react, because there was no blueprint, there was no manual for this. You had to kind of react and respond as a situation evolved. But when you look back on it, is there anything that you would do differently?
I wish I had it in the crisis management manual. We over the years, we always invest in these crisis management manuals that tells you, well, if you have a fire and this is how it's open, your IT will be hosted off site and this is how we'll work and so on. And some of the working remotely and so on was in there, but there was no section on pandemics. So I wish I was able to put my hands on one of them and say, right, this is how we're going to handle a pandemic. It was just on the hoof. I think what would I do? I would certainly be looking at the supply chain and the key products within the supply chain, the essential things and so on, and immediately getting on to increase orders and so on, because we weren't just sure. I would be hoping that we would get more clarity on exactly who could open and how we could continue to trade and so on, and who should stay closed, because I think there are some big problems with advice and so on from governments on that. I think there are some people closed that shouldn't be closed, that are essential. Like, you know, why would you close a golf club when you can leave the parks open? You know,
Yeah.
What's going on there? What's with the thinking around that? Is it the 5K thinking, where, you know, a golfer would love to play golf from a mental health point of view, and
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
on. And then there are things like, you know, you see a lot, like local shoe shop near me. There's two girls own it. They've been running it for 30 years. It's a lovely business, and it's their livelihood, and it's closed. And I'm going, why could they not do socially distant, one customer at a time in there? You know, I mean, what would be wrong with that? And so on, you know. You know, so there are different ways that we can learn from this, looking back and say, and writing a new template that if it happens again, and please God it won't, but if it does happen again, that we're very clear on what we can do, and that we make the good decisions and the right decisions for people, society, but yet, you know, stay safe, etc.
Absolutely.
And I suppose learn as well from our hospital's point of view. We've got to invest in health and our health system and so on, because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you've nothing. It doesn't matter about your wealth or your job or anything. If you have this and you need these frontline workers, doctors and nurses to help you, and we find that we don't have enough respirators, or we don't have enough beds, or we don't have enough facilities, and we're overrun, that's not acceptable in this day and age. We have to be ready and prepared as a society, because there's nothing more important than that.
Absolutely. Paul, I want to thank you for joining me here today. I knew that the story that you'd have about United Hardware, how you've managed and how you personally managed, would be, you know, great tips in there. So thank you indeed for joining us, and I wish you and United Hardware continued success.
Thank you very much, John.